All right, we're going to get started here. Hopefully we'll have some more folks jumping on a little bit later, but do want to respect people's time and get moving. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our Leader to Leader session. Today, we're going to be talking about the SMART program as a way to hopefully bolster the pipeline for school mental health professionals coming into our schools. My name is Bob Kefchin. I'm the Associate Director for Government Relations with the Michigan Association of Secondary School Principals. We have a great panel with us here today. Before I introduce them, I do just want to review the norms for our Leader to Leader sessions. Please use the Q&A system to post questions. You can also use that to upvote questions that you want to make sure get asked during today's session. Use the chat to introduce yourself. Also to add any ideas or comments you might have during the session that you want to share. And do, as you're chatting, make sure that your chat is set to send to everyone. Otherwise, by default, your comments will just get sent to panelists. Today's slide deck and a recording of today's session will be emailed to participants. And we're also going to include the recording and a recap and the slides and other materials in headlines on Monday. So if you missed it or you know somebody who wanted to join today but wasn't able to, we will make sure to share all of this information out so that you can check it out later, pass it along, share it with your boss as you need to. Quick disclaimer, I'm a lobbyist, it's what I do. Please note that the webinar is being recorded and we will be posting this for public viewing. The information provided today by MASSP and our panelists is advisory. It's based on the best information we have available as of today, right now. But knowing that the way the legislature works and the way things change and budgets evolve, know that that could change. So as you're moving forward with this, as you're looking to implement programs potentially in your building, in your district, do double check and seek specific guidance around any of these things that you might need from the experts here on our panel today. Reach out to MASSP, check with your business office before you move forward. Great panel here today. Pleased to welcome Dr. Amanda Unger, Special Education Supervisor with West Shore ESD and affiliated with the Michigan Association of School Psychologists. Kathy Weaver, a school social worker with Allen Park Public Schools and the Michigan Association of School Social Workers President. Dr. Lauren Magnus, a licensed psychologist and a past president of the Michigan Association of School Psychologists. Michelle Milhouse, a school psychologist with Claire Gladwin, RESD, and Michigan Association of School Psychologists Shortage Committee Chair. Also with us today is Mr. Noah Smith. He's a partner with Capital Services Incorporated. Like me, Noah's a lobbyist, but he's been much more involved in passing the SMART legislation that we're going to be talking about today, and also in the budget discussions that have been going along with that. So glad to have him here to be able to answer the legislative questions so I don't have to make up funny answers. Before we get started, I do want to just talk briefly about where the information that we're going to learn today about the SMART program fits in the larger discussion about school mental health professional pipeline. Because we have in the budget a number of different lines, a number of different line items and categoricals aimed at recruiting or retaining teachers. We have lines aimed at building up school capacity around mental health, even school safety. So I want to focus in on two of those line items today and show how those things could work in tandem to really support this particular program. In particular, we're going to be talking about Section 31AA and Section 31O. Section 31O is a line item that's been around for a while now that some of you may be familiar with. This year it's a $240 million line item. And what that is a 3-year grant that offsets the cost to hire new school mental health professionals, where the state pays 100% of the median wage for a person in that position in the first year, 66% the second year, 33% the third year, with an agreement that the district retains the position moving forward. The one challenge I've heard most from principals about this particular line item is that they're having trouble finding school mental health professionals to hire. Money aside, they would love to hire a new school counselor or school social worker, but they just can't find a person. Section 31AA is new this year. It is a flexible per pupil formula grant that districts are going to receive. It's $107 per pupil, But one of the allowable uses of that grant is the SMART program, which we're going to learn about today. And I'm not going to pretend to know a ton about the SMART program because I don't. But I want you to think about it in terms of how could you marry these two programs, or how could you layer these funding streams to create a pipeline of school mental health professionals into your building. So consider this particular model, and this is one way this could play. It's not the only way, and it doesn't mean that you have to do things this way, but I wanted to give you at least one practical example of what this might look like. Think of it in year one that you use 31AA funding to bring a SMART intern into your building. This could be somebody who's ready to graduate the next year, or maybe not, but let's say they do. Let's say that you bring them in, they do their internship, they finish their degree, and they graduate the next year. And the next year, you then have somebody who's been in your building, who knows your programs, that you can then hire as a school mental health professional using 31O dollars. And so what you see here is that over the course of 5 years, you've gotten some of the services of a school mental health professional, and you've brought someone up through your system, and 4 of those 5 years of their first 5 years of employment have been subsidized to some greater or lesser extent by the state. So just wanted to put that out there for context as a way to think about how you might move forward on implementing the SMART program in your building right now using existing funding streams. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let the experts on this program take it from here and dig a little deeper into exactly what SMART is.
All right, good afternoon. Thank you so much for having us. We're really passionate about this program. It's come out of a dire need for mental health services in our schools, and we think it's a great answer for addressing those shortages. Next slide, please. So this is a state-funded Grow Your Own program, utilizing people within your local area to be able to start them into your systems and to get them used to your different stakeholders and grow within your district so that you can address this mental health need. It's paid for work experiences, so there's lots of different ways that you can utilize the people that take part in this program. And it gives them practice with school-based mental health for those graduate students, and gives them real-world experience as they're completing their graduate program. The funding is available for school psychology, school social work, and school counseling graduate students. Next slide. How this came about was a couple different ways, a few different ways. One, within our local ISD, we had a school psych shortage for many years. And we had a graduate student approach us and say, is there anything that I could do in your system right now? She was in her first year. And at that time, there wasn't an answer, but we knew we couldn't let her go somewhere else, because she'd be, once she gets connected somewhere else, then it's going to be hard to pull that person back after she's fully certified and everything. So we looked at what were the needs that we had, and they fell into the area of things like providing interventions for students, and for even subbing in some of our classrooms, learning MTSS, and providing some small group instruction or reteaching of some certain skills. And so what we decided to do was pair the real world experience with needs within our school with what students were learning in their graduate program. This also comes from like a medical model where you see one, do one, teach one, or like in our trades too, where you learn from a master teacher, the apprentice studies and learns from doing. But taking off that too, and looking at in our local region, Ohio has had a model of apprentices for a long time and found success with that for addressing their needs. Next slide. Then specifically looking at the school psych shortage, and that's an area where I supervise school psychologists. So MASSP has put together a job database, and what we've seen from tracking that data, and you notice in this chart these are the different universities that have had school psychology programs within the state of Michigan. And they're not able to fill the number of jobs that are out there. 77 unfilled jobs, and that's a really low estimate, most likely. Those are just the people, the local districts and ISDs that put their jobs up there. And not to say that everyone does that. So when it comes down to it, we're at least 30 to 50 or so, or maybe even more, who knows, short for school psychologists. So that's having districts have to contract, have to bring retired people back into the field, look at virtual services, and really preventing school psychologists specifically from being able to do all the prevention and intervention that we would like for them to do. Next slide.
Okay, so I'll provide some additional information regarding the program. The state funds students who are part of the SMART program through, as we mentioned, 31 AA funds. Each school psychology, school social worker, and school counselor graduate student earns $25 an hour for 20 hours a week for 30 weeks in the year, which is equivalent to approximately $15,000. The 20 hours a week was intentionally chosen because that's generally what like research assistant positions or graduate assistant positions are. So it's kind of a happy medium of giving the students work hours and money without overwhelming them in terms of number of hours, considering they're still in classes. Also talked about reaching out to universities potentially now, because as more schools start to develop this program, the competition for students is definitely going to be tight. Part of the reason the Grow Your Own concept came about is the MASSP has done presentations statewide at colleges regarding the field of school psychology through what's called the NASP Exposure Project. The thing we continually heard from students is we're very excited about this profession, but we're already way over our heads in debt from undergrad with the cost of college. So it's trying to find some financial incentives for students in entering the field. So as we've mentioned, school psychology, school counseling, and school graduate students can participate in the program. You can hire students for multiple disciplines. Let's say you want 1 year to have a school psychology graduate student and a school social worker graduate student. You're able to hire across disciplines. The only limitation really is how much 31 AA funds you have. Students can complete their work experiences in school districts or ISDs in Michigan, but they can be enrolled in colleges outside of the state. We do have some students who participate in online programs, or for those who are near the border, the University of Toledo. We've done a lot of partnership with them regarding the SMART program. They already had like an apprenticeship program going that was more of a grassroots apprenticeship, just districts funded their own. So Dr. Reynolds is definitely on board and has been a very strong advocate and support for us in starting up this program. Go ahead, next slide. So the funding for the SMART program, as we mentioned, school districts and ISDs can use 31 AA funds to hire. This is particularly for first and second year graduate students. We did receive requests or questions regarding doctoral students. They're able to participate in their first and second year, but it caps at that. Doctoral students can't participate in their third, fourth, fifth year. And that was intentional because we really were trying to provide funding for practitioners. A lot of doctorate students are able to tap into research assistant positions through various grants and various research projects. So it was intentional. That way we have people who are aiming to go back into the schools when they're done with their graduate work. So as we talked about, the pipeline of funding is available to cover during graduate school and after graduation. As we already covered, 31O funds can be used to hire a full employee. There's going to be open hiring opportunities in 2023 and 2024. And I guess what I think is important to stress at this point in time is there's a lot of money out there compared to 10 to 15 years ago. So really at this point in time, 15 years ago, trying to get a mental health position funded, an extra one, was really tough. Right now, we're looking at a decent chunk of money out there. It's just allocating this funds for the SMART program or for mental health services. And I think back to a conversation I had with one of my principals a number of years ago, and he said, you know, when I'm fully staffed with mental health people, my job is so much easier because X amount of things hit my desk at any given moment. And some of them truly are discipline issues that should just be dealt with by the principal. And some of them are more mental health needs. And so he said, if I can, you know, start to funnel out those situations, it just makes your job as principals a lot easier, and the students make a lot more progress. Next slide. So basically how the hiring process works is, like I mentioned, you would reach out to a university, either a local university or a university that offers either hybrid, meaning some online classes and some in person or online. and hire the student in the normal fashion that you would hire any employee, going through the interview process, things like that. And then from there, the person we put on your payroll, but the funding stream, similar to other funding situations, would be paid for by the 31 AA funds. So the person would be paid by your district, but the funding would be streamed through the 31 AA funds. As I mentioned, you can hire multiple students within each profession. If you wanted 2 school psychology graduate students or 2 school social work students, as I mentioned, the only limitation is really your 31 AA funds, which at this point in time are pretty nice. Next slide here.
So the next couple of slides really deal with some of the typical roles of specifically school psychology students and school social work students. I don't necessarily want to get into the details too much in the weeds here, because there is a lot of different things that students are able to do. However, one of the things that we really want to make sure is that students aren't doing things that are beyond the scope of their practice, because ethically, they definitely have to, all of us professionally have to stay within our scope of practice. So the next couple of slides just have samplings of different roles that students have done their first and second years of respective school psychology and school social work programs. So I'm just going to go through those. You can see there's a lot of information here, which you'll also have copies of the slides that you can refer to. But one of the things that we really want to emphasize is how important it is to collaborate with the universities and partner with the training programs. So, specifically, what are some of the things that students can and cannot do? Definitely things that are not appropriate for SMART students would be any unsupervised special education assessment, especially if the graduate students have not had the requisite training yet, or any unsupervised leadership of special education team meetings, so IEPs, reads, those type of things. And also too, unsupervised crisis response and intervention. We know that we have a shortage of mental health providers, both in schools and in community settings, and just the needs are so great, but we have to make sure that districts and students are not putting, students at risk, the P through 12 students, but also too that there's no liability here. So emphasizing really talking to the programs, having those communications is really, really vital. And another thing too is, as an administrator, it could be very beneficial to talk to your school psychologists, school social workers, and school counselors to know about their specific training and what the needs are, as well as collaborating with the universities. So some of the advantages of the SMART program, there are many for school districts and ISDs, but some of the things that we definitely have seen in our work and things that have happened, and even looking in the future, is first and foremost addressing the critical shortage of mental health providers, in particular school psychologists. There has been such a tremendous shortage, as Michelle had pointed out. And then also too, this helps support current school psychologists prevent burnout and other mental health providers. And I'd honestly say for administrators too, because I know that has been a big thing as stress for administrators and all educators, and burnout. So for us in particular, in all of our work with our lobbyists and all of our collaborative organizations across the state, this was a very novel solution for these really immediate shortage needs and also long-term. So we're really building that pipeline. So another thing that we found to be very beneficial is that when students are able to engage in these apprenticeship type tasks, that really frees up your current mental health staff so that they can do more complex or sensitive work that is needed in the schools. Additionally, this has allowed us to recruit students from other states, as has been pointed out here, which is really great because we're highlighting, just so many of the benefits to being able to work in Michigan and engage in our schools here. Additionally, through the SMART program, we're definitely able to recruit more folks into school mental health training programs. So that's something, as Michelle had shared with the exposure project, this really helps to spread the word out and really get individuals in. And also too, with SMART students entering internship and jobs with extensive job training, it's very important. And I also would like to give Kathy Weaver, our school social work colleague here, some opportunities to talk about school social work side of things.
Hi, thank you. I appreciate that, Lauren. As you stated earlier, I'll just dovetail on what you said. We don't want to get too much into the weeds about specifically what a first year and second year school social work intern can do. However, it is important to note that in a first year placement, a graduate student would likely be doing more administrative sorts of tasks and really shadowing the school mental health provider that's in the building, the school social worker that's in the building. And then your advanced placement and your second year student would be actually having student contact hours with your student population. Let's see, thank you. Not sure, what's the next slide? Oh, thanks. Next.
So Kathy, maybe we can go ahead and talk about this together, about setting up the SMART program within districts and ISDs, how important it is, as we have said, to contact the program director of school psychology, school social work, and school counseling programs. We do have on the next two slides some of the context too. So Kathy, that would be wonderful for you to go over the school social work. We unfortunately don't have a slide for school counselors, but that information is available.
Hey, Lauren, Judy is on the call and she offered to speak to
Wonderful.
school counselors. She's a professor at Grand Valley. So Judy, if you want to
Excellent.
go ahead and add some information, that'd be wonderful.
Yeah, and I'll just add right now that the on the slide where it says the list of school social work programs and contacts in Michigan, there's a link that talks about the, it's called the approved advanced programs. And it's actually a link to all three of the mental health providers. So if you were to use that link, you would be able to identify school counseling, school social work, and school psychologist advanced programs so that you can connect with those. I'll just give a quick shout out to school social work in particular. I just had a call with the inter-university representatives, so that's a representative from each one of the universities from across the state of Michigan who have an approved school social work program. They are aware, they are excited, they are your contacts, and they are ready to educate their students to get this set up.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Judy. So as you can see, as far as all of our mental health providers and entities, so school social work, school counselors, school psychologists, please reach out. We will have contact information for you. I'll go ahead and advance the slides momentarily. But again, we cannot emphasize enough how important it is to collaborate with program faculty just to determine the needs of your district and also to marry that with the student program requirements. Also too, program directors for the specific programs can also help provide guidance regarding how to create these attractive positions so that the students are able to get broad opportunities, so depth and breadth in their experiences. And also too, that program directors can help districts balance those meaningful positive learning experience to help benefit your students and staff as well. And then also too, interviewing potential candidates. As Dr. Unger had pointed out, really having those relations with students and just really getting the word out. And then SMART program participants are hired through the school ISD using the funds as we had talked about too. So that's how that works, but really talking with programs can really help to create that momentum. So here are the list of the school psychology programs in Michigan and neighboring states here. And then also too, if there's any programs that you have that you don't see on this list that are out of state, there's a contact for Dr. Jana Opperly. So she's our university liaison with the Michigan Association of School Psychologists. Her contact information is there. And then also Michelle, who is on this panel. If you'd like to possibly link up with other universities that are not included on this list. And I'll go ahead and let Judy and Kathy talk more. And this is what Judy was talking about as far as the link.
That was actually my voice that you were listening to. This is Kathy.
Oh, I'm sorry, Kathy.
You're okay. You're okay. That's fine. So this is the link that I was referring to. This is the list of school social work programs that have approved programs in the state of Michigan. It is a complete list. And this is the updated list of contact individuals. These are the folks who provide supervision for students who are in field placement. And in the yellow text, that's the link for approved advanced programs across all 3 disciplines: school psych, school social work, and school counselor.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kathy. I'm so sorry about that. Before we proceed to the next slide, I just want to make sure that we give Judy any opportunity to share information about school counselor.
So Judy just commented that in this particular format, participants can't unmute.
Okay, wonderful. Well, if there's anything that
If
be
you
included.
give me a second, guys, I can actually promote Judy to a panelist and she can join us.
Sure,
That
that'd
would
be great. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Judy, you should be able to unmute now.
I should be good to go. And I'm not dressed for the occasion. It's probably the quickest promotion I've ever gotten in my life. So I'm looking for my first paycheck. I can't wait to get it from y'all. Thank you for allowing me to jump in a little bit about who I am. I'm the former president of the Michigan School Counselor Association. I'm now the graduate program director at Grand Valley State University MED and School Counseling Program. And this is an area that I've been incredibly interested in learning more about, because just as the folks on the panel are seeing from the university end, we are being contacted regularly by those administrators in the field who aren't able to secure school counselors. And we know that there is an abundance of people with a school counseling credential in the state. However, there's a shortage in the number of those people who are working. To provide some context just from the Grand Valley perspective at this point in time, we have about 30 to 31 interns this semester. And of those, at least a third have already secured full-time jobs. And we're seeing more and more students joining our program that have been hired in some capacity to serve in the role of a school counselor without even being in a graduate program. And so it's not unique to what we're seeing at Grand Valley. We're seeing it across the state. So just to expand a little bit on the information I was able to put in a chat, we are bound by the requirements of the Michigan Department of Education, in that all students have to complete a 100-hour practicum experience. And that's going to look a little different from university to university. So if an administrator is looking to utilize 31AA funding to hire someone in their practicum experience, it's important to know specifically what that student is required to do as a part of that. So for instance, at Grand Valley, our practicum hours are spread over all of the school counseling emphasis area classes, and they may only be in a school for 10 to 15 hours a semester. However, with the internship, our students are required to complete a 600-hour internship. Now, that might look a little different for what's known as a KCREP accredited counseling program that have a clinical focus, and the students then specialize in school counseling. They may be doing 300 hours in a clinical setting and then 300 hours in a school. A Grand Valley student does 600 hours all within that school or combination of schools. And so it becomes difficult for some students who are not employed as teachers, that's a little bit different, to be able to devote that amount of time and give up the earning potential. And so being able to hire a school counseling intern into one of those positions as an intern working under the supervision of fully credentialed school counselor or counselor educator for at least 2 years of experience, it allows them then to work alongside their site supervisor and assume all those duties as they are deemed ready that a school counselor does. And so that would involve everything from tier 1 classroom instruction. It would involve tier 2 small group counseling, working in referral, consultation, collaboration with other professionals and other stakeholders, including parents. And so it's a real win-win. The other thing, and I'm sure that social workers and psychologists are the same situation, especially for interns, one of the benefits of hiring those individuals in their internship is they have a double level of supervision. So they're under the supervision of a licensed professional or a credentialed professional in the school, but then they're also receiving university supervision. And in our program, that's weekly. So you think about when all of us were brand new in our profession, we may have been assigned a mentor, but it wasn't anything that formal. And as an example, this semester, I'm able to have one full set of my interns who are employed as school counselors in their first job. So not only do they have a site supervisor to go to get input on policies within the school, kind of immediate feedback, but they can also bring that back to the university to get that more program, broad-based, perhaps even ethical perspective than what they might gain otherwise. Anything else that I can do to support the cause here a little bit?
I really appreciate that perspective, Judy, and thank you so much. And yeah, we're definitely seeing a lot of the same stuff. So definitely a lot of similar echoed sentiments. We really appreciate you being able to give that perspective. And I believe we're on our next slide with some of the mentor thoughts. So I don't know if Dr. Unger, you want to speak to this about just some of the things that you've seen with your experience as far as some of those mentor perspectives.
Absolutely. Thank you. Right now everyone's being asked to do more and more, and it's really hard to ask someone to do something in addition to what they're already doing. What I'm finding, though, is that these opportunities are really, really important for our staff that have been in the field for a while. It fills them up. It gives them hope. It helps them to reconnect with why they went into this career. And then their experience are just so much more rich. So you can read some of the quotes there. We have quotes from people who are without or just out of the program for a couple of years. We have some veterans that have been in 20 plus years, and then someone in the middle as well. But everyone, the mentors themselves get so much from it that it's just been extremely valuable for them. And go ahead, next slide. All right. And there's our contact information. We're all really open to reaching out, working together. And just, like I said in the beginning, very passionate about this. And the number one thing is that we need to retain these young people in our newcomers to our field. And so we have to make sure that they have a rich foundation to draw from and feel really comfortable in their position, because this is their first interaction with that. So there's lots of things that we've learned along the way, so we'd be happy to talk individually if you'd like. And I think we have time for questions or looking in through the chat to see what we want to lift out.
I see a couple of questions in the chat. Judy, you actually posted a couple of questions. So why don't you just go ahead?
Okay, so we have students, and I'm sure those programs in school psych and school psychology or school social work have the same situation, where students desire to complete a more traditional internship. Perhaps they're living in Grand Rapids, attending Grand Valley, but they want to go back home to do their internship or relocate, whatever reason. Is that 31AA funding going to be available to those who are not hired by a district to do their internship to offset some of that cost?
The individual school district would have to choose, like they'd hire them, they could hire them directly through the school district, and that school district has to choose to participate in the 31AA funds. Like each school district and ISD would have the 31AA funds, but they have to choose to allocate the funding that way. So there are students right now who have been placed prior to this all starting, working for free, so to speak. And so that would, the student could reach out to the district, or the university could reach out to the district and say, hey, there's this new program, here's the information, and see if they would be open to now using those funds for paying the student.
So that leads right into my other question, Michelle, thank you, is who is going to be the responsible party for making this information public knowledge for our students? Is this something that university instructors are going to have to share with students and have them then advocate for this as a part of their internship? School districts say, oh, we'll go ahead and use that funding. I'm just wondering how all this is going to fit together.
We're putting information out in terms of emails and things like that. We're doing a webinar, and the Michigan Association of School Psychologists is also doing a webinar on October 10th that would be open to anyone in terms of your students in your university folk. So it's kind of being spread out that way. Noah, do you have anything to add regarding kind of how we're advertising?
Yeah, right. I mean, some of the context behind why things are a little wonkier than we're hoping for is that the budget passed at a different point in time in the year than the statute passed. So we're in this odd phase now where the bulk of the marketing of the program is going to be shared between the groups that want this, MSCA, MASP, and MASSW. The university programs that are producing the students who will eventually become interns are a part of this because they should be expecting calls from districts and marketing this to their own students as a potential paid internship possibility as they're choosing a clinical or a community path or a school path or whatever they want to. And then forums like this, like MASSP is giving us to say, here's how it's going to work for the time being in the current budget year. You're paying it, the district pays and sort of administers this, which is really the same thing that a school district has always done. Reach out, get an intern into your schools and have them complete their hours. What you just get to add to it now is a per pupil grant pile of money that your schools are sitting on to actually be able to pay the interns or apprentices, whatever you'd like to call them. Which is different sometimes in the past where it's been a mishmash of some schools could do that because they had the resources to do so and some schools couldn't. This spreads that wealth as we sort of build this program and make it increasingly more sophisticated and eventually involve MDE.
So for local districts, I think the thing that principals will want to know is that these 31 AA dollars are out there right now. They're going to every district in the state.
Okay.
Right. Your district is going to have to file a form with the Department of Ed to draw down these dollars. But that's out there right now. And it's simply just a checkbox. It's yes, we're going to accept these dollars. And yes, we're going to use them for supporting student mental health. Once you get those dollars, it's a question of how are you going to allocate them? And so choosing to allocate these dollars toward a SMART program, toward a paid internship for a future school mental health professional gives your district hopefully a leg up on recruiting somebody to your district, bringing somebody into your system and building your local pipeline. I think the framing of this as a grow your own program is a really good way to look at this. Moving forward, we don't know how the funding for this will look. Remember that every year with the budget, the legislature tweaks and adjusts things. It could very well be that in future years, there is a specific pot of money available for the SMART program. It could continue to be what it is now, which is a flexible per pupil set of money, a formula grant that each district receives. But do keep this in mind as you're looking at ways to build that local pipeline so that when you go to recruit school mental health professionals, there is actually a pool of candidates to look at rather than posting a job and not getting anybody apply.
And speaking to that, building that pool of candidates too, it's the best experience I've had thus far is getting someone in their very first year of grad school, because then you can really just involve them in so many different activities within your district and get them to know all those things that they don't teach you in college of, making friends with the secretary and going in, how to run the copy machine and all those other things that add stressors when you are new to a system. And then as they grow in the years, they're just that much more prepared. And there's a real difference in the end product.
The only other question I see in the chat was from Shauna Birchmeyer, who's looking for ways to support her student success coordinator. Shauna, if there's anything else you need to know about that, please feel free to put it in the chat or the Q&A. But other than that, unless I see any other questions, I think we've answered what's out there for right now.
I do think it would be beneficial if the counselor educators in the state were given an opportunity to hear from this panel as well. because obviously this is directed toward principals, and I appreciate the work that they do and supporting all of our mental health interns. But I think those of us at the university level have a little bit different strand of concerns or questions. And so if this panel would be willing to help, and would be willing to help coordinate a meeting with the counselor educators at the various universities across the state, I'd be happy to do that.
That would be wonderful. I just saw another question pop up too, and it said for someone that's already in the system and then in a grad program. And so, yeah, the answer to that is yes, they absolutely can utilize that. So
I just wanted to clarify, is the student a program for school counseling or like a different form of counseling? But I guess what's the specific program they're in? That would be helpful to know too.
school counseling.
Okay, yes, they would already, it just would be a matter of the school district or ISD hiring them on and allocating, paying their salary through the 31 AA funds. But as he mentioned, the money is available at this point in time, ready to go.
And I think on that, just to piggyback off of what Michelle was saying too, one thing to keep in mind, because, you know, even I'm just going to speak specifically to school psychology for a moment here. We are credentialed through the Michigan Department of Education. So this is specifically for school-based mental health programs. And we have students that also too sometimes will go and get an outside degree where they can become a limited licensed psychologist, for example, and practice in a clinical sector, which is done through the licensing and regulatory affairs through LARA, that credentialing. So if they're in a program for that, these funds would not support it. This is specifically to build that school pipeline to help people that are in school specific programs to become school social workers, school counselors, or school psychologists.
It also doesn't apply to undergraduate students. Like I know we have an intern who's a psych undergrad, a school social work undergrad student. So she's not able to use the funds specifically for graduate students.
For those districts that are fortunate to already have a budget for these types of apprentice or intern positions, you can also then use it as a leg up for recruitment purposes. So if you already have that, then you can give like the 15,000 at the end and then for that person and help to retain them in your district too.
Well, thank you all very much for the information and for presenting today. I don't see any other questions in the Q&A or in the chat. So I think at this point, we've covered everything. Very much appreciate all of the information that you guys have shared with us. The recording of today's session and the slides that folks have shared. I also have a couple of one-page handouts from our presenters today. Will all be posted to MASSP's website. It will be emailed to everybody that signed up for today's webinar. And we'll also be able to, we're also going to post that in our headlines newsletter that comes out on Monday morning. So you'll be able to see that. So if you want to share this with another colleague, be able to pass this information on, maybe pass it up the chain within your district to your superintendent, please know that those materials will be available for you. Not seeing anything else, I think we're all set. Thank you all to our panelists for joining us today. We very much appreciate it. And thank you all to our attendees for joining us and learning about this opportunity.